I know. Just looking at this right now, you probably wouldn't assume this to be a visual novel. But trust me, more than 80% of it definitely still is. Welcome to day 4 of Z Memories with Duel Savior Justice and Destiny. A visual novel side-scrolling beat-up hybrid by Giga, a company much more famous for, as I hinted in the last video, the Baldur series, a long-running top-down mecha beat-em-up action series that is also like 80% visual novel. And when I say long-running, I mean like the first 2 games in the series, Baldur Fist and Baldur Head, were released over 2 decades ago in 1999. Incidentally, that is why the Giga branch dedicated to this series is called Team Baldur Head, named after the first game. The Baldur series has a focus on cyberpunk futuristic virtual reality hacking, where most of the main characters are hackers using VR mechs, known as simulacrums, to break into databases and fight viruses. It's overall a pretty cool series that tackles a lot of interesting sci-fi themes, like when technology goes too far, freedom of information, freedom of thought, and so on. Now, we are not here today to talk about the Baldur series, as much as this intro probably leads you to believe. Rather, we're here to talk about one of Giga's other games, where the story doesn't quite have the nuance of a good Baldur game, but god dang, is it still one of my favorites. Duel Savior follows the story of Toma, Taiga, and his sister Mia, who are suddenly transported from modern-day Japan into the sort of sorcery world of Avatar. So you know, it's an isekai, before isekais became ridiculously popular with Sword Art Online. It is certainly not the first, the hack series has done it before, and isekais has been a thing since the earliest days of anime, with shows like Aura Battler done by, and probably even earlier than that, but I digress. In Duel Savior, every 1,000 years there is a prophecy that when destruction comes near, the Messiah will come from a different world and save everyone. Taiga and Mia quickly become Messiah candidates. Taiga because he wants to make his world harem plan come true, and Mia mostly because she gets dragged along. They must train with the other candidates, defeat the Lords of Ruin, and save the multiverse. If this plot sounds exceedingly generic, it's only because the base plot really is. That said, it's a Giga game, so of course there's still a pretty great underlying plot beneath the generic surface. And of course, unlockable route order and true endings are in place as always. Unlike previous entries of Z Memories, I don't actually have a really super fun personal story this time around. Duel Savior is just a visual novel I happen to really like. It was the first, and still is, one of the best action visual novel hybrids I've ever played. Which isn't too crazy of a statement to make. When it comes to doujin groups, most visual novels, if they have gameplay, tend to opt into the turn-based kind. Actually, scratch that. Even when comparing to other sprite beat-em-ups, Duel Savior is actually pretty dang good still. The combat, while super easy to get into, as it only has 3 buttons outside of movement, allows for crazy and fun combos to perform. This accompanied by difficulty setting you can change at will, where the hardest difficulty requires some actual mastery, and you have an incredibly satisfying game to play. Duel Savior isn't the only visual novel action hybrid I've played. There was a spiritual successor made by Giga to Duel Savior called Material Brave. But rather than just using different sprites like in Duel Savior, Material Brave opted to use like tween animations, which made everyone flail their arms like really bad action figures, and it just looked really terrible. Combat itself was similar, but I just thought that Duel Savior did it better. After having replayed Duel Savior for this look back, it's definitely one of those simple to play, hard to master kind of fighting games. Air dash, ground dash, animation canceling, frame advantage, short hops, dash cancels, double jumps, linking, pressuring. There's a lot of hidden depth in Duel Savior's combat. Sure, if you play the easy mode, you can just smash your way through the combat to get to the story, but for those who want to get into the hardest difficulty and dive into the survival mode, there is a lot to learn and feel like a total badass doing it. I'm not even that great at the combat and I still think it's shockingly fun. Outside of Giga, other companies have also done similar things. Sorawo Aokite Kumo Takaku is pretty much in the same genre, that of a side-scrolling beat-em-up. Duel Savior still remains my favorite though. While it certainly doesn't have the customization of a Baldur series for making your own moveset, it does have 7 unique characters, each with their own set of moves and sprites. This doesn't even include the extra 33 unlockable characters in survival mode, which brings the total to a whopping 40 different characters to play as. Holy snap! While the base story is simple, the translated script by the one-man at Seiha Translations is an absolute riot. His translation is a little crude, but I like it. The main character Taiga Toma is legitimately really funny, actively poking fun at the generic isekai setting they are in. He's got so many great voice lines, and I'm very impressed how much Toma's added voice acting for the PS2 version gave to the overall game. Replaying Duel Savior for Z Memories was a surprisingly great time. I booted it up just looking to get some quick footage and ended up running through 3 of the routes. It's filled with surprisingly good humor, like this early one in the very beginning.
だからちょっと待て。ここで一旦話を整理しよう。CM。
デュエルセイバー。今の名は何？
気にするな。地球式の休憩だ。
It's pretty stupid, yeah, but I enjoyed it. Duel Savior had 3 versions, the original, Justice, and Destiny. Justice is the original with some add-ons like a challenge mode, while Destiny is the all-ages PS2 release, which replaces all the 18+ content with new non-age scenes, and changes the true ending harem route to a Princess Clea route, for obvious reasons. Mid-2000s was actually an incredibly popular time for doujin groups to port their releases to consoles, specifically PS2, as Xbox wasn't quite as popular in Japan at the time. In the process, they had to remove all the 18+ scenes, as those weren't allowed to be shown on console releases. There is an adult tag for the ESRB, but nearly no game release actually applies it, as any game with that rating would run into way too much trouble to get sold. In an effort to make people interested in playing a release with cut content essentially, developers usually try to include some enhancements or alternative content like updated music, new routes, voice acting, more movies, and so on. Tons of visual novels follow this trend. Fate Stay Night with Ryota Nua, Wind A Breath of Heart, Only You Liber Cross, Air, Ever 17, Cross Channel. There were quite a few that made the transition. None of these console visual novels ever made it to an international release and were only released in Japan, probably due to an unsurprising, perceived lack of interest in visual novels internationally, which to say it simpler, Japan thought it wouldn't sell. As for Duel Savior Destiny, aside from the updates I mentioned earlier, they had a new opening cinematic and changed some of the in-game CGs, with the greatest change being that Toma Taiga now has a face instead of the weird faceless protagonist thing he had going on originally. Thanks to the efforts of one translator at Seiha Translations, the fan translation has combined the main character voice and additional CGs from Destiny into a single package, which means you can flip between which one you want to play. That said, you still have to choose between playthroughs with version to play, so whatever you think is more important, 18+ scenes or different CG with the main character's face. Personally, it's about the same in my opinion. Swapping out a bathing scene with an 18+ scene doesn't really make that big of a difference, and I do like Taiga having a face. Okay, so I'm about to get into a tiny bit of spoilers at this point to talk about my favorite members of the cast. So here's your chance to jump out if you want to come in completely blind. Let me start off by saying, out of the entire cast, Taiga's sister Mia is just the absolute worst. If they were trying to make her exceedingly unlikable, boy, did they succeed. She is basically the possessive bro-con character who is overly attached to the main character Taiga Toma, which only gets way worse in her actual route. To be completely honest here, I don't even care one bit about the fact they are half-siblings actually. I wouldn't even care if they were full-on brother and sister. I just don't like the way she acts. She's possessive, annoying, kinda helpless too, and all of this is amplified on her route. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Kaide's probably my favorite out of the lot. Her base archetype is the airheaded serious ninja character who tries her best, but is kinda clumsy and fumbles a bit here and there. Most likely this preference is influenced by how much I liked ninjas back in the day, and how much I still like short hair right now, but she's still my favorite character out of all the heroines. Kaede unfortunately suffers from the circumstance where, as one of the 2 beginning routes, her actual story is incredibly simple, and she doesn't get too much character development beyond the usual overcoming her fears and such. This is because in Duel Savior, you end up playing each of the heroine routes sequentially, where after completing some, others unlock. Usually what ends up happening in these sorts of visual novels is that the first few routes tackle more surface level topics, while the later routes get into the meat and potatoes of the game. Kaide's still cute though. She even does the whole ending her sentences with Gozaru thing, which you sometimes hear from characters who are trying to replicate like ninjas from the Edo period. Doesn't really appeal to me, but I imagine it is a plus for some people. I also really like Kaide's moveset, which in a game like this is pretty important. My next favorite heroine will be Nanashi, the zombie girl with a portable head, and probably 10 times more character development than Kaide ever gets. While her moveset is not as fun to pull off, Nanashi makes up for it by having a route that was actually fairly interesting and furthered the overall plot. As for the rest of the cast, Tsundere Fire Mage, Princess Clea, Moonlighting Priest, Riko Risu, they all kind of get lumped into the same category of, well, they exist? To be frank, I don't really remember liking or disliking any of them, which means that 10 years later, they hadn't left enough of an impression for it to stick in my mind at all. Like, I know what happens at the end of the route, and literally nothing else. And with that, I think that about wraps up day 4 of Z Memories. Duel Savior, I really did enjoy it back when I played it. Unfortunately, it has compatibility issues working with Windows 10, so something like an XP VirtualBox would most likely be necessary to play it, just like with the original Ball of Force release. As always, like if you enjoy the content, Twitter handle will be on the center of the end screen in a hot second, and subscribe if you haven't already to find out when day 5 of Z Memories will come out. All I'm gonna tease on this one is that day 5 will probably be my most guilty favorite out of the entire list. Thanks for sticking around. As usual, the previous Z Memory on Phoenix Wright is on top, with the bottom being something else you might find interesting. I'll see you next time.